so fat that is put him King Chubby. He was so fond of food that he couldn't bear to be without it for very long. Eating was his big hobby. He began with a big breakfast at 8 o'clock, had a slight snack at 10, and a large lunch at 12. Then he exercised by watching 2 tennis players, and since exercise gave him an appetite, he ate a small snack at about 2 in the afternoon. At 4, he had sandwiches, and at 7 in the evening, he happily sat down to a royal banquet. There was a royal banquet every evening, even if the king was the only one at the table. Eating was so important to him that it affected everything he... When he fell in love with a duchess from another kingdom, he said, "Then eat a whole roast pig." Needless to say, the duchess never spoke to him again. His love of eating also got him in trouble in other ways. He was always losing his royal cooks. He just couldn't keep from telling them how to improve their cooking. 6 cooks had already left in a huff. One evening, when the king entered the banquet hall and saw a sandwich on his plate, he knew what had happened. "Oh my, I see cook number 7 has left."
"Yes, Your Majesty. He said he could no longer cook for a king who kept changing all his recipes. And now there are no more royal cooks available. I just don't know how to find another cook. There just aren't any."
"I know. A royal cook is a royal cook because he has the imagination to make up unusual recipes. There must be many good cooks with imagination in my kingdom. We'll have a contest, and the one who tells me the most unusual recipe can be the royal cook." The next day, proclamations were posted throughout the kingdom, inviting all cooks to enter the contest. There was great excitement. Every housewife who considered herself a good cook, and every cook from every inn in the kingdom, came clamoring to the castle. They formed a line, crossed the drawbridge, went up the stairs, and flowed into the throne room, where the king was interviewing them. In they came, offering enough recipes to fill 7 fat cookbooks, or 70 fat kings. But to each, King Chubby shook his head.
"Oh, that's not unusual,"
he'd say, or,
"I've had that before."
While this was going on, a shabby young man came trudging up the road toward the castle. He had patched knees and elbows, and the feather in his worn hat was bedraggled. But he had a merry grin, and he was whistling a happy tune. When he saw the long line of people, he went up to a soldier.
"What's going on?"
"The king's looking for a new royal cook, mate. The cook with the most unusual recipe will get the job, and he'll live in the palace off the best of the land."
"Wouldn't that be wonderful?"
"Well, I don't know, mate. Cooks don't get along with the king. He tells them what to do, puts things in their pots. He all but does the cooking himself."
"You don't say."
And the young man got in line.
"Oh, are you a cook?"
"I'm just the sort of cook the king wants, and I have the most unusual recipe he's ever heard of."
It was late afternoon when he reached the throne room.
Oh,
The king was looking very glum. Not one cook had offered a recipe he considered unusual. And now the last of them was this ragged fellow who looked far too thin to be much of a cook.
"Well, what's your name and recipe?"
"I'm Klaus Dinkelspiel, Your Majesty. And my recipe is so unusual, so rare, that I'll wager you've never heard of it. It's dragon stew.
Well, that sounds different. What's in it? Besides dragon, of course.
Oh, I can't tell you. It has been a secret in my family for 13 generations.
Oh, I understand. But if we can ever locate a dragon, you must make it for me. However, you can begin by preparing an ordinary royal banquet. You are the new royal cook.
And what would you like for dinner?
Well, how about roast pig with applesauce?
And would your majesty care to show me exactly how you want it cooked?
You mean you won't care if I offer advice and suggestions? Why, you and I are going to get along just fine.
So off they went to the kitchen and collected everything the king needed.
Now, how would you prepare this, your majesty?
King Chubby, greatly delighted, stuffed the pig, trussed it up, and then peeled and sliced the apples. Klaus watched and kept saying,
Just how I'd have done it. I used the same method.
Soon the pig was brown and savory, and the sauce bubbling merrily.
I thank you for all your suggestions, sire. Now, if you will go to the banquet hall, I'll serve you the banquet I've prepared.
When the king had gobbled up the last piece of pork and soppet of gravy, he announced that it was the finest banquet he'd ever eaten, and Klaus was the finest cook he'd ever had. And from then on, the king and his new cook were well satisfied. King Chubby, because he now had all his favorite dishes, cooked exactly as he liked them. And Klaus, because he was living off the best of the land. Until, one morning, a good many months after he had become the royal cook.
Surprise! I sent them out to find a dragon months ago, and it's taken all this time to find one. Now you can cook your special dragon stew tonight. I promise I won't try to find out your secret. I won't even set foot in the kitchen today.
Careful of him, cook. He bites, scratches, and can shoot fire 3 feet out of his nose.
Klaus stared at the small dragon. A tear trickled slowly down its cheek.
Are you trying to think of the best way to kill me? It isn't fair. I was minding my own business, bothering no one. Suddenly your soldiers attacked me, carried me here to be made into stew. I don't want to make you into stew. I didn't think there were any dragons when I made up that silly recipe. I just wanted to fool the king into thinking I was a cook. I couldn't make any stew if my life depended on it. And it probably does. The king will have me beheaded when he finds out that I fooled him.
Oh, making stew is easy. You soak the meat in wine and spices, brown it in butter, and simmer it slowly in broth with onions and carrots. I always throw in a few mushrooms and some parsley, too. And then...
You can cook? I thought dragons only ate raw princesses and things like that.
Heavens, no. Actually, I'm a good cook. Living alone, I've had to do all my own cooking. I've become quite a chef, if I do say so myself. Suddenly, Klaus began to grin and nod his head, as though he had thought of something. At 7 o'clock, the king watched eagerly as Klaus carried in a steaming bowl and ladled chunks of beautifully browned meat and vegetables, swimming in rich gravy onto the king's plate.
after 4 helpings, he leaned back with a sigh. Oh, that certainly is one of the best stews I've ever eaten. Oh, what a shame we can never have it again. That was probably the world's last dragon.
Oh, we can have it as often as you like, Your Majesty. You see, the thing that makes a dragon stew such a rare recipe is that it can only be cooked by a dragon. Allow me to present my assistant.
In came the dragon.
Under my direction, my assistant will be happy to make dragon stew whenever you want it.
So, everything turned out quite well. King Chubby was able to cook his own banquets just as he liked them. He could also have dragon stew, made from beef, as often as he wanted it. Klaus was happy to be living off the best of the land without having to work hard for it. The dragon was delighted to be an assistant royal cook.